Hello guys, Charles here and welcome back to my channel. So I recently remembered a really powerful, almost like super powered exercise that I used to do when I was a student. For many of you, you probably don't know, but actually when I studied at university, which was a decade ago, believe it or not, I know I still look about 12 years old, but I used to study the classical pipe organ, the church organ. Now, although I was certainly never a world-class player, I got to quite a good standard. I could play like the Toccata and Fugue in D minor. I could play some of the César Franck chorales and preludes. You know, I was barely hanging on for dear life, but one of the really important things to point out is that I did all of that without ever really practicing on an organ. Now, those who don't know, an organ is a keyboard-based instrument, but it has several keyboards, which is not actually as confusing as it seems. But the real challenge of the organ is that you also play with your feet. So you can kind of think of it as one of your hands does chords, the other hand does melodies, and your feet are like the bass, like a bass guitar. Now, the problem with that is very few of us have access to an organ. A pipe organ's about the price of a house, and many can be worth the price of a mansion. Most of us don't have access to these instruments, and although obviously there was one when I was studying at university, it was in the main concert hall, which was constantly being used by orchestras and could be booked by anyone. So actually getting time on the organ, you'd be lucky if you spent 1 or 2 practice sessions on it before each of your recitals. So the question is, how do you practice the church organ, and how do you develop the ability to play the church organ without ever playing it, and especially not playing it daily or even weekly, or even in my case, monthly I didn't play an organ? Well, I used my ear training skills. Now, this is the skill that I remembered recently, and I was thinking, how can this apply to the guitar? So what I used to do is, like most people, I had access to a single keyboard. I didn't have a double keyboard, I didn't have MIDI pedals, I literally just had a piano. So what I would do is I would learn the manuals part, I'd learn the piano part of the organ pieces, and then I would sing the bass part. I would play along and I would sing what my feet were going to be playing when I was on a real organ. And amazingly, if I could sing it, I could play it. Now, that doesn't mean there wasn't a few technical things that I needed to sort out, whether I'm playing it with, you use your heel or your toe and all this sort of stuff. But I would often actually just play on the floor as well with my feet, doing the heel or toe. That was kind of the final thing. And if I could sing it, I could play it. And it was absolutely amazingly powerful. And what I realised was that this idea of coordination is not really about being able to do it with that exact limb, i.e., it's not about whether I can actually get my feet to do it or not. It's just whether my body can coordinate it by itself. So if I can sing it, for my body's purposes, that's basically as good as doing it with my feet. And so when it comes to actually doing it with my feet, my body doesn't have much of an adjustment to make in order to do that. So I got through a whole 3-year undergraduate degree in classical pipe organ just by singing and playing a piano. So it's a ridiculously powerful exercise. Now, most of you probably aren't wanting to learn the pipe organ. If you do, now you know how to do it. But I was thinking, how can this relate to the guitar? And I kind of had a few ideas that I wanted to share with you today. So the 2 uses that I can think of for this on the guitar, I'm sure there's many more, but one is to really know your standards, and the second is to coordinate our chromaticism, which I'll explain in a moment. So when we're playing standards, we need to know the underlying harmony. We need to know the changes. If you can sing the changes whilst you're soloing, that is a way of proving you know the changes. We can think we know the changes, we can think we can hear them in our head, but there's no way of really knowing if we really know them or not. So we've got to put it to the test, and the way to do that would be to sing the roots of the chords as you solo. Now, of course, this is going to be a coordination challenge. Your brain's going to be singing the roots while your fingers are trying to do a solo, so everything's going to get a little bit worse. So you need to break this down and work on it. Now, if you're someone who thinks they can sing the roots already, then obviously you know what to do. Just sit down, probably best to do it with a metronome so that you're really strict, and sing the roots of the changes and try and solo at the same time. It's as simple as that. However, if you're someone who thinks you're going to struggle with this, a couple of tips for you. The first would be either using a scoring software or a DAW. Write out a bass part for the standard you're trying to learn. Make sure there's a metronome or a click in the part as well, and write it in a kind of interval range that's going to fit your voice. And so you're going to have a bass part that you can then play along to. And before you actually play, you're going to make sure you can just sing along and match the pitches, really focusing on the click and really getting those pitches in your head. So try and sing it before you can play it. Next, you're going to try and solo at the same time, and your soloing is going to be dreadful because you're trying to do two things at once, and soloing requires 110% of our attention. As you get more and more confident, you're just going to reduce the volume of your backing track, maybe 3 dB a week or something like that, until you're able to do it with complete silence. And you want to practice that every single day until you have those changes in your head. You're going to get better at the coordination, just like on the organ. When you first try and play with your feet and your hands and all this stuff at the same time, it's terrible, and it eventually just becomes automatic. If your body can coordinate it, you can do it. Here's an example on a 2-5-1. So I'll not do a click for now because it's going to be frustrating for you. 2, 3, 4. Something like that. Now on a 2-5-1, for me that's not too difficult, but singing on standards is really hard. Keeping that bass note going whilst you're playing a standard is tough. Oh, I find it tough anyway. Generally there's phrases which are easier than others, and there's certain phrases, especially things that are built on tritone subs and stuff like that, which are really difficult to pitch. And if you can't sing it, it suggests you're going to struggle to hear phrases over that, because we kind of need to know what's coming next. If we can sing what's coming next, then it proves that we've really got it in our ear, and our lines are more likely to resolve effectively. We're more likely to hear melodies that work correctly than if we've just got a vague idea, like within 1 or 2 semitones of where the music's going. So if you can really sing the changes, really sing the root, it's going to be incredibly useful for you. Now the second thought I had is to do with chromaticism, and I realised that in order to play chromatically, I want to make sure that I hear chromaticism against the correct root. Without that, it's a bit like me clapping a rhythm. But if that was supposed to be a tuplet, you can't hear that because it's got nothing against it. For that to be a triplet, I have to go ba, 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 ba. I have to coordinate it with something, otherwise it doesn't feel like anything. It just feels like a beat. Same with chromaticism. If we just play something chromatic or superimpose a chord, it just sounds like the chord we've superimposed. We need to hear it in our mind's ear against the correct note. So this is where it gets a lot harder. So if I come back to my 2-5-1, which I sang quite confidently before, if I now superimpose stuff over that and try and keep singing D, G, C, I'm probably going to find this a lot harder. So for example, I might want to superimpose D flat major on my D minor chord, and then maybe B flat 7 over my G7, resolving to C. So I'm going to try that, but singing D, G, C. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. So not good enough. My roots were not solid enough. And therefore, it tells me that even though sometimes when I'm improvising over a backing track, I'll play ideas which I think are really killer, I'm not actually hearing them relative to the tune itself. I'm just hearing them as their own structures. And that's something that I definitely need to work on, and presumably you do as well. So chromaticism, by itself is great, but we need to coordinate the chromaticism with the tonal center of the context we're playing over. And it's that coordination that I think once you get that down, you can then hear these chromaticisms organically, rather than having to think, right, I'm going to do a D flat over this and I'm going to do a B flat over that. You'll just start to hear them. This exercise has so many more benefits, of course. It trains you with your interval learning. It just trains your pitch center in general. But presumably some of you can think of ways of utilizing this singing whilst you're playing. One of the things that people suggest you do is singing the solo as you are soloing. So going like this. But the reason I've never found that particularly useful is because, well firstly because I've always just found that one quite easy. There's some singing things, as I've already demonstrated, which I don't find easy, but that's something which wasn't really much of a challenge for me anyway. But secondly, you're getting the reference. You're just singing what you're playing. So it's much harder to sing an independent line, and that proves you've really got the coordination down. So as with many of these chatty videos, I'm just sharing some thoughts with you today, but hopefully there was something in there which you find useful or interesting. If you did find this one useful, please do give it a like, subscribe, ding that notification bell, and share with any of your friends who you think might benefit from this content. Just a reminder, I'm well over 200 videos on YouTube now. I get a few questions where I've already made videos about those things, which is absolutely fine, and I'll always share the link. But just spend a moment to go to my actual channel and look through the videos there. I've done some playlists which I will admit need tidying up, but go through the videos and I'm sure you'll find what you're looking for there. We've covered all sorts of topics now. And as always, I hope you're all doing very well, getting plenty of practice in, and I very much look forward to seeing you in the next one. Cheers.
Roll up, let me embed a story you'll never forget. A drip, drip, drowning in debt now. You can't buy your way out. And